Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Rixtons, the Boston Bookhead, and today we are joined by Stephen L. Peck. He's an evolutionary biologist, poet, novelist, and a leading voice in contemporary Mormon literature. A professor at Brigham Young University, Dr. Peck blends science and spirituality in both his academic work and his fiction, challenging genre boundaries and exploring deep philosophical questions. His award-winning novels, The Scholar of Moab and A Short Stay in Hell, have earned critical acclaim for their emotional resonance and intellectual depth, really. We're thrilled to dive into his unique worldview, his crossroads of science and faith, and the creative mind behind some of his most thought-provoking fiction. So, Stephen, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for doing this. It's one of my
Absolutely.
favorite things to do is to talk philosophy and books and literature. So,
Yeah, so Stephen and I were talking a little bit before I hit the record button here, but I did want to tell you a short stay in hell, which I think is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think how most people find you today, uh, it just blew me out of the water. It was insane. It is a short, you know, book, and just it was incredible. Actually, I have it right here. Thin but very, very powerful, deeply philosophical. You're exploring these huge questions, meaning, time, and faith in a concisely absurd way, I want to say. And it's just a unique premise. An infinite library, I know, is something Borges explored, but I think you take it to a totally different direction. And it's a haunting, but I don't know, weirdly uplifting book. I don't have enough good things to say about it. And I will say I actually found it through a YouTube video of someone talking about, do you want to blow your mind? Because this book will do it. And it was about a 5-minute breakdown of your book. So I just don't have enough good things to say about how amazing I thought it was.
oh, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. Do you find that's kind of your maybe what Radiohead's Creep, that's your kind of biggest hit now there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's been around for a while, like 10 years or so, and it suddenly took off the last 2 years. It got a TikTok badge for being a book talk hit, and I've been surprised and pleased by the response. But yeah, I think most people discover it online, and both TikTok and YouTube has had a lot of attention. So I'm thrilled that this is all happening. So I'm really happy that it's found an audience that I think. Today is kind of an age where this book resonates. I think the effect of COVID, the attention to a lot of things going on in the world is creating, I think, almost an existential crisis. And since that's what this book is about, I think it's found that audience.
I completely agree. And I remember, especially during COVID, or right after, what was really popping up in the mom and pop good bookshops was, you know, uh, like a lot of Albert Camus or
Uh-huh.
Sartre's like short fiction there. So
Yeah.
who there was a really famous one. It was at the Existentialist Cafe, and I can't remember the author's name right off the top of my head, but it was just and it was a newer book, just New York Times bestseller, whatever. Kind of one of those high accolades, and it really was just kind of fascinating to see this stuff that I'm very passionate about, like existential literature, kind of
Uh-huh.
it came in the mainstream. It wasn't for the cool kids anymore, it was for
That's
the
right.
airport readers. So
That's right.
I think your book definitely fit right in there. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later, just because I think maybe a lot of your ideas and uh, kind of way of view about an author and scientist are maybe reflected in there, but
Mhm.
we'll talk about that in a second. So just to kind of general get to know you, you know, as an author and as a scientist, what is your goal? I guess what is your message that you want to portray, either as both or individually? And maybe this is more reflective on what your what you feel your mission as a human being on this earth might be.
That's a great question. And it's got a weird answer to it because I think what I write, what I like to write, just emerges from who I am. Because I don't have a goal per se. I'm not trying to convey anything or leave a moral or try to explore answers. I think I've always been more interested in questions. I think questions are where the interesting things are happening. I'd rather find a good question than a good answer. So, so the way that I write is I I read voraciously and I sort of it becomes a part of me. It becomes a part of my memory, who I am. And when I sit down to write, a lot of times I just have an idea and I start writing. And as I write, the book unfolds and the book starts to appear. And I follow it where it goes. This sounds a lot like woohoo, but I find that at some point the book wants to become something, and I don't really have a say. If that sounds strange, I do. I mean, I recognize the rationality that I have goals and intentions that appear, but a lot of times they shift. They'll take on new directions. I can give you one of the most dramatic examples was you mentioned the scholar, or are going to mention the scholar of Moab, I think.
Mhm.
And that was just a book about this kid from Moab. That's my hometown, Moab, Utah. So if you're a
Yep.
mountain biker, you'll know that you'll have heard of it. I walked into a mountain bike store in North Carolina and said I was from Moab, and they called everybody from the back. I felt like a, 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 a Muslim from Mecca and
Yeah,
got
yeah.
that kind of attention. So
This is the example right here. Yeah.
yeah. So but I was writing just a story about kind of a an odd character, I'll say. But at one point, I was writing a scene up in the LaSalles, which are mountains near Moab, and suddenly, out of the blue, I was out for a run. In fact, a conjoined twin cowboy rode up, and in a sense, demanded to be in the book. I mean, not literally, but
Right.
and I started playing with the appearance of this two-headed individual who had degrees from Cambridge and was
Yeah.
cowboying because he couldn't find a job anywhere. Being a conjoined twin, uh, the academics of the time were not going to allow somebody who didn't represent their stodgy Cambridge
Yeah.
background, and um, so they were depressed and thinking, and they became a major character in the book. But they weren't there from the beginning. I didn't have an outline that said, they appear and they do this and that. They just emerged. And so the way that I describe my writing is it's very organic. I don't know where it's going to go a lot of times, and I'm surprised by where it goes. And I think that makes the reading experience as surprised as I am. A lot of times characters make choices I don't like, and I think, oh, don't do that, but they do. So,
Right. So would you say, I mean, I guess your goal as an author then is really just to channel your environment, your emotional environment, physical environment around you into something, I mean, really artistic, what you can what you're seeing is not what other people are seeing. You're coming from a unique place, a unique background, and that's something to be heard. And I think that's why uh, people are attracted to your writing and your perspectives on things.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. And and a lot of times I write just because I like it a lot. I love to write.
Yeah,
I honestly find in it a source of wrestling with issues or thinking through um, the things that are currently on my mind is almost a kind of therapy. And it's really for me, I don't, I, 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 I can't imagine life without writing. It's such a part of who I am and what I enjoy and the way that I engage in discovery. I do my best thinking while I'm writing. In fact, sometimes I'll think I need to write something and I start and then the ideas come. The ideas don't come until I'm actually engaged in the writing exercise, and
Yeah.
that's when the ideas appear. So,
Really briefly, your journey as a writer, I think being an artist in any sense can be
mhm,
intimidating to anyone,
mhm,
because you can get pretty I don't know. I mean, my own world, like I was a musician for a while. I
mhm.
think sometimes you struggle with there's so many writers, so many musicians, so many artists out there. Who the hell am I to even
Yeah.
go and try? Did you, like very briefly, what was your kind of writing journey? Did you ever have any of that kind of doubt in your mind, or were you just like, you know what, this is a very natural thing for me, and you came out of the womb just with pen in hand and slinging it out?
Oh, that's a great question because it's almost kind of a funny story because I've always, well, always is maybe too long, but it started in seventh grade. And when
Hmm.
I was in seventh grade, I was mercilessly picked on by this kid. He was a bully, and he literally chased me home almost every day, and it was really hard. I mean, it was traumatic for me as a seventh grader. And
Right.
we were doing a section on poetry, and the teacher asked me to write, or asked the class to write a poem. And I was interested in poetry. I started, I can't remember when I started, but I remember getting those stacks of book from Scholastic from the teachers, and I'd always get poetry books if I could. So I wrote this long epic poem about a weasel. And though the poem is gone, I'm pretty sure it's the greatest poem about a weasel ever written. I can't prove it because I don't have it, but I'll make that claim. But the teacher liked it enough, she had me read it in front of the class. It was, you know, full of drama and it had a very sort of sappy ending as a seventh grader would write. And I looked down and the bully was crying and I knew I was
Wow.
dead.
Yeah, and that
And
was
he
it.
saw me see him cry and that was the end of it. I was this was not going to end well. And so
Yeah.
I
Wow.
saw him leave, and so I went out, and there he was waiting. And then he kind of grabbed me, and he said, "Pick, that's the greatest thing you've ever done." And then he walked away. I had like 2 weeks of bully-free uh, non-attention, and I realized
Yeah.
poetry has power. Wow. And that's where it started. And from that time on, I mean, probably starting in high school and especially when I got into my undergraduate, I started getting in writing groups and trying it, and all kinds of writing groups. When I was in graduate school, I was in North Carolina, so I was with a group of Southern writers, and I went from there to a group of science fiction and fantasy writers, and I've always sort of jumped genres and tried to do my best at building craft. And so I never, and I had lots of rejections. I mean, if you're going to be a writer, I'm probably a musician as well, you just have to get used to rejection. It's inevitable and relentless because you're right. There are a lot of people trying to get into it. But I didn't give up and I kept trying. And finally I started getting a few publications and then it started to pick up. But and if you're working, for example, on a writing degree right now of any sort, you may want to plug your ears because I'm gonna give really bad advice. But I don't write to an audience. I literally write for me. I'm the only one that I care that I read it. And so and part of it is I don't have to write for a living. If I'm trying to break into certain markets, I probably should, try to write to a group or a genre or something. But for me, I really don't. I don't write to a particular audience. I write the things that mean something to me, and that's tended to work. I'm not sure why, but that's been a truth from my writing journey.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I guess my one follow-up question for that is, did you now follow the bully home and run after him and read your poetry aloud to kind of get him, or so it's,
Yeah, that
um,
would have been a good idea.
yeah, it's poetry's power, man. But no, I think that's something. That's a very similar take that I remember very explicitly. Led Zeppelin had that same exact thing where it was just like, we're not writing for anyone. They came out with the most unique sounding
Yes,
whatever,
yes.
and just pushed the limits on what music could be at that time. So, yeah, I resonate with that answer. That's
Yeah, thank you
killer.
for comparing me to Led Zeppelin. That's like, whoa.
You're the Led Zeppelin of 2009 existential literature. It's a pretty
Yeah,
good title to have.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
So so yeah, both Scholar of Moab and Short Stay in Hell deal with characters in search of meaning. Soren, he's like in an infinite library. Paul, he's in the remote part of the Utah desert there, and each reflects kind of what I'd think is an existential crisis that recalls maybe some absurd elements of Albert Camus, maybe some faith versus despair feelings of Kierkegaard. But that's my background. That's my own interpretation of it. Where do your philosophical influences come, whether, a certain school or maybe background in biology, LDS theology?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it came out of I wanted to be a philosopher for a while, so I majored for a bit as a philosophy major. But I had a biology professor. I was at an ecology camp, and I wanted to use it to study ecology, but I ended up he talked me out of it, and ended up taking more math than I could ever possibly use. But I I took a class in Kierkegaard and was smitten ever since, and I've continued to follow his current biographies, to read his work. My favorite was well, there's so many favorites, but my very favorite is the unscientific concluding unscientific postscript, where he talks about something that's really resonated with me, and that's this idea that faith is irrational. And I want to contextualize that because I do believe in rationality. I mean, I ended up my doctorate is in mathematics, biomathematics, and but I think it's incomplete in a way. I think the things that science can capture has limits, and this is another one of my favorite philosophers, which probably would surprise a lot of people, is Henri Bergson. But he was a he everybody wanted to claim him and wanted to disown him for his the inability to categorize him. He never had a school. He never figured, no one. He didn't have any. The way that the French Academy he taught at worked was that people would just pay to come to his lectures, and so he didn't have a following or directed any dissertations, anything like that. And but he thought a lot about memory and uh, things beyond not just uh, uh, free will, but that too, but also what kind of play there was in the world. What couldn't you pick up by just focusing on the objective things that you can measure, like we do in science? Because that's the realm of science, and that's science's role. And science uses reduction, and it uses all these kinds of tools to get at a world that you're extracting meaning from. You want to get to some objective world and capture that, but it's becoming more and more apparent that that's inadequate for all the kinds of different re depths of reality. Uh, and so I love science and I use it, and I believe reduction is the right tool for science. But I don't think reduction answers all of the questions. I think there are things that science can't get at. And we're seeing more of that in sort of the growing interest in the medieval mystics, like Hildegard von Bingen and some of the others, Julian of Norwich, who had a very rich sort of mystical encounter with something beyond them. And that interests me a lot. So I'm always trying to explore this idea of what can we know? How can it be expressed? What does it mean for me as a living being? How do I live a life in light of the things that I'm discovering in that way? So I think Kierkegaard, Bergson are two big influences, but I've also been influenced, I think, by Nietzsche. Nietzsche's one of my favorite thinkers. I find his confidence and his expression of not he wasn't speaking to an audience either. He
Right. Yeah.
he was writing the things that he was deeply drawn to, and in the end, he went crazy, and maybe that's the inevitable fate of all philosophers. But he
Well, was it I might be misremembering this as a different character, but wasn't that he had seen a horse die in the middle of
yeah
the street, and that you know what I what the phrase nowadays a justified breakdown, justified crash out. That's what it is.
yeah
That's the humorous take on it. But yeah, I mean, you can see a lot. I mean, I think in his later writings, like some of the pitches and correction where he was going, but not to interrupt your train of thought here, but it's kind of funny. This is coming all circular to your writing here, which you mentioned earlier, where you're going and you're asking questions, and that's how you're getting to the next place. You're the why kid, which is
yeah
much better than the kid who just says okay.
yeah
So obviously, I'm also a huge Kierkegaard fan, and his biggest idol, one of his biggest influences, Socrates, was the ultimate why kid.
yeah
He's
yeah
just
yeah
would
exactly
not stop. And I like the Bergson tie-in too, because like you're saying, he's a little funny because he's unlike most French philosophers where you have like Michel Foucault, and this is the way things are.
yeah yeah
This is what I think. These
yeah
are the systems you're in, and even I think Sartre can get that way. I think,
Hmm?
but it's interesting, and I think that's where a lot of the philosophers you're mentioning. Um, I have to say this to myself 300 times a day to keep from getting overly upset about anything, but it's what you don't know,
yeah
and that's the only certain thing. Which I think that comes from Socrates, and then I think Anthony Bourdain had a riff on that, and it was solidified forever. So
yeah
it's a central line, I think, in all of that. Um, so I think you know I guess as a BYU biology professor right now, I kind of want to bring this. You're talking a little bit more about objective truths,
Hmm?
and how those can be relevant, but also at the same time, you need to acknowledge that there's a lot more to that.
yeah
Um, so, as a BYU biology professor, from what I've researched, you teach that evolution is not at odds with religious faith, and
right.
you said that gaining knowledge builds, you know, helps build kind of a kingdom of God in a sense. So, how do your scientific perspectives on faith kind of inform your training, and how does that interplay the shape of your philosophical ideas, both in what you teach on the day to day and in your fiction?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think a lot of times in science, faith gets a short shrift. It tends to how do I put this? Because faith is not objective in the same sense. I can't hand you a recipe for a laboratory and say this will God appear. That's not the way it works. It's an existential encounter, and this is why I think some of the medieval mystics are so useful today, is to capture this idea that really faith is based on experience. I've never been drawn to rational proofs of God, like Anselm's ontological argument or any of those, because for me, it's experience at the core of what it means to be human, and that's not an objective thing you can actually um, make arguments that are logical proofs. I think though I wrote this really weird paper. It was published in the journal Zygon, the Journal of Science, and I just came from a conference that's on Star Island off the coast of New Hampshire and Maine.
Awesome.
So on religious experience in science and in faith. And I think when I think about faith, it's all based upon experiences, and they're not necessarily like revelations. It's an encounter with something that I have two claims that I tell myself. I don't tell this as, this is what everybody will experience or anything, but I do, that there is something that loves me and attends to me. I feel that. I feel that in my heart as I do my walk. If I sort of glance upward, there's a sense, and this is often related to things like aesthetic experience, like being in the mountains or being in a religious ceremony or something, that to me indicates there is more to the universe than I can give. And I recognize that you can create arguments that, oh, this is just our brains being human. This is, there was an evolved response. And the thing is, I think that's true too. I think in order for um, um, understanding fully what faith and science can do, you have to acknowledge that both can be relevant. You can see signatures in the human lineage where you see these times that occur. I'll give you an example. For example, humans evolved around 300,000 years ago. And for most of that 300,000, we use the same toolkit with very little modifications. We hammered out the same tool over and over and over again. It was kind of repetitive. We see the same things in Homo erectus, and we see the same things in a lot of the proto-humans that appeared on our line and in our lineage. But about 50,000 years ago, something wonderful happened. Suddenly, art appears. We see cave paintings. We see the use of beads. We begin to see the decoration of things. We see toolkits now that have aesthetic value. You see intricate workings that both have a functionality enhancement, but also something that exceeds the need for functionality. It would do well with a much easier and less elaborate sort of spear point. And it seems to me that something happened to our brains and to our connection with something inexplicable. It was always there. We had the same brain. That's the weird thing is we don't know. We've never seen the brains of the pre-50,000s year old fossils, but that's because the brain doesn't fossilize well. But
Are you saying maybe like a disconnect to something a little bit more physical or more spiritual?
and see that's where I would sort of say both.
Hmm.
I'd say I can't separate that one can exist without the other. I think there is something about embodiment that allows bigger and better opportunities for engagement in the world in new ways, in new ways. So I tend not to think about that dichotomy as being a way that I like to think about it because I engage with both, but there, and this is where Bergson becomes really strong. He argued that when we get into the kind of complexity that a human body is and whatever influences like spirit or soul that might be involved in it as well, that it's not a single thing. It's both deeply embedded into both realms so that they're inseparable. And that's why you can study spirituality with science. You can, some researchers have put monks in MRI machines and then measured levels of neural activity during meditative practices of prayer and things like that. So that it really isn't one thing or the other, that spirituality and the physical aspects of what it means to be a human are so connected that to separate them, I think, creates kind of category mistakes that don't work. This is
I
my
think no, yeah, and I kind of resonated too with a lot of you know, maybe this is a common follow-up to this, but uh today I think with a lot of the technology, how it's advancing as rapidly as it is,
Mhm.
uh, to your point about how we have the same toolkit, our toolkit in the last, 50, 100 years has changed so rapidly,
Yes, yes.
and it's exponentially growing where you have something, I'll say faith in any way, shape, or form, where it's pushed out simply because our tools today demand us to change our attention so much faster than we used to be able to.
Wow, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I haven't thought about it like that, but that's a really insightful idea because yeah, we are going through something similar to happened 50,000 years ago. New tools, new awarenesses, the attention that our modern society takes in terms of internet, like what we're doing right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and this is more long form though. I'm
yeah,
saying in the sense this is I think a lot of people hit the doom scrolling point where it's like you're there, but your mind, you can sit there for a full hour and your mind just doesn't retain it. And even myself, I had the exact same issue. I just about maybe 2 months ago deleted Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, everything off my phone. My long-term memory, this is a very personal experience, but I feel like my long-term memory has come back so much. I can't even tell you. Like I can think again. And an interview like this, it's, maybe this is I'm a dork, but this is more my kind of long-term format. Like these are things that uh types of media I'll go back and watch and kind of take down because it's worth the bigger picture. So, the continued point is if you're not even able to retain your memory on maybe 20 minutes on your phone. Where's your attention span coming from that you can dedicate it to a bigger picture of faith in your life, you know?
yeah,
Um, so that's where I see it as a problem. Maybe that can be interpreted as a more Republican take, not to get political, but on, that loss of faith in the US influences the culture.
mhm,
But I think maybe it could be vice versa, where that loss of religion is caused by the culture, I mean,
yeah,
and not even the culture, but the guys who make the iPhone. So,
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's right. This sense we and this is concerning is one of the things I think when we think about philosophy and things is that our new media lends itself to falsehoods and conspiracy theories and sort of the ability to think through how do I want to think about this? What am I doing? Am I thinking well on this? And even this is where Nietzsche comes in really strongly, I think, is this idea that we have obligations to the deeper things, the deeper things. I mean, I think about is thus spoke Zarathustra, and this idea of a person trying to communicate with people who are too distracted in their daily lives to listen to the message that he's giving about ultimate truth and about what matters. And he's thinking mostly about power and things like that. But I think it applies well in this case too.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, and this is maybe more Western countries too, but it's those values that are set in that. Um, so it's interesting because that work in particular, you can take someone like uh, Hitler and the Nazi Party who take that as a totally different interpretation, where the power and the truth is
Yes.
creating this overman, this superhuman, where you have this kind of subsect of guys like me who just sat in their room during COVID and were reading this, but in our environment, it's not the we're not German dictators. We're kids who are trying to pay rent.
Yeah.
We're kids who are looking at what the power structures maybe in the
Yeah.
US are, or Western cultures. So that to us becomes a monetary sense. So where is the line where it's like you gotta find that inner truth? And I think I tell my friends is I feel very blessed might be the word. Uh, for me and my fiance, we talk about this. It's like at the end of the day, we have each other and our two cats, and that's my baseline. And everything else from there is a plus. Like, you got to kind of
Yeah.
recognize that that's as lucky as you can get right there. So I don't know. It's different where you're taking these huge grand proclamations of power, uh, but then kind of filtering them down into an everyday sense and figuring out where your distractions are
Yeah.
and what you really need to survive is kind of interesting to think about.
And I think your solution is completely legitimate there, where you think about how do I engage in power? Well, you focused on a small set of people that matter to you, and that's a kind of claiming power that you're not going to let, the apps dictate your life. So yeah, I like that.
I actually think that might be a good transition. So I have a few more questions in particular about a short stay in hell, because again, I
Yeah.
feel like this might be a uh, maybe more encapsulating version of your work from what I've read.
Mhm.
So for those who have not read it, A Short Stay in Hell is a novella about a man who dies. He finds himself in a hell based on the religion of Zoroastrianism,
Mhm.
um, which he had never followed, and his eternal punishment is to search for a book that exactly matches his life story in this infinite and very chaotic library, which is really just an impossible task. And at the end of the book, you explain and you actually do the math out on how big this library is. If you were to jump from the top railing and fall down, it's X amount of trillion of years or something
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about the book, honestly, that I like the most, where I both read it and then listened to the audiobook because I went back and it was just this is crazy. And picturing, I don't think our minds were meant to think about what you wrote about in
Yeah.
terms of size. I couldn't do it. I was sitting there and I was like, I'm driving down I-95 every day, 2 hours to wherever, and that's huge to me. And just to have a library that's almost an infinite amount of that, it's just absolutely astonishing. So, um, you
Yeah.
know, I do want to start with short saying how it hits readers with its not a hard twist, but I thought it was kind of funky that the true religion that everyone should have been following is Zoroastrianism. So like what for you inspired the I guess theological curveball there? Was it maybe a critique of religious certainty or something more personal?
Oh, that's yeah. It actually is a critique on religious certainty. I picked Zoroastrianism mostly because it was obscure enough that nobody would know the details that I pictured reading the book. I didn't know the book would take off. I honestly,
Yeah.
it was a book for my friends, you know.
Right.
Um, but I think it's worked well because it does look at that certainty. I think certainty is one of the biggest problems we have in our society today, is people who are promoting conspiracy theories are certain. There is a level of certainty in people, and I think it becomes sometimes can become a dangerous and harmful element of religion. I mean, I have an advantage because science demands a lack of certainty. You're always
No.
questioning your assumptions, your findings, that it's been analyzed right. And so for me, I see that as one of the dangers of 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 thought, is this kind of certainty, and it's becoming. I think people are becoming aware of it. People are thinking about scrupulosity and the dangers of trying to adhere to things that are less certain than they should be for total. How do I put this? Paul Tillich, a theologian that I really admire, talked about that our religion is really what our ultimate concern is. And that when you don't allow for exploration and testing and looking at where things are, that certainty can become a danger. And so I think I wanted the readers, or I hope now that I've kind of thought about it more, I wanted the readers to recognize, what if I'm wrong about this or that? What if I'm wrong about my religion? What if I'm wrong about my, commitments to certain elements of life, like our the country we live in, or the things like that? What if you woke up one day and it was revealed to you, and like at a death, and the announcement that no, you were following the wrong religion? I think it subverts that certainty in a healthy way, because it's a good question to ask no matter where you are. And even if you hold on, like I do, like I hold on to my faith, but it's not been a naive, I'm just going to believe this no matter what. It's been a journey, and yet the journey has opened to me new thoughts and new encounters, and things that I think are valuable and important. So I think that's why I did that.
Yeah, I mean, so a few things. One, I think you're totally right on in terms of your faith is, or sorry, your line was your religion is what you fear the most in a sense. But um I don't know, that just made me think, like, I think the most religious people I know, especially having spent a few years at Villanova, uh the most religious people I know are the most uncertain about religion. And it's
Yeah.
weird. It's like you're the most devout person, and you're constantly at odds with it. And I myself consider myself to be very agnostic. I was raised Catholic, Boston suburbs, that's what you do.
Uh-huh.
And I came out, but it's just, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Mormonism, all of that can be completely correct. And, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't have enough evidence to say one thing or the other. My thought was always that I thought Christianity was too big for its own good. And I say that in the sense that I went down to college in Nashville, Tennessee, and the very big things are non-denominational mega churches down there.
Hmm.
So I would meet these girls, and they would take me on the first date to their mega church, and it was just a sea of different interpretations of the same general idea, same general premise. And I remember one day there was just some guy in the back, and he was like, he was a little off his rocker, but he was just kind of going on this rant where he was like, 90% of the people in here aren't making it into the real heaven. They're not. They're just like, this is what I believe. I follow the Bible down to the T. This is what you do. And this is, if you neglect any of that and have your own interpretation of whatever is the true word, you're not going to make it.
Hmm.
And it kind of just threw me for a loop where I was like, wow, there's people in here that, even though they're coming together under one idea, which is fantastic, the the clash of ideas is still very much there. Um, so, what I guess kind of maybe I'll back up a little bit, and this is maybe should have been the first question, but
Mhm.
what was the, driving force behind this story? Like what was it, all from a religious question? I mean, it's a little bit more adventuresome than that maybe.
Mhm.
But yeah, where I mean, where were you where you're like, I gotta write this, this is the idea, let's make it happen.
So um, it started with the reading of the Borges story. So, there's a sign on the wall that says, "This hell is based
Yeah.
on the Borges story." So, I
Very,
didn't hide
very,
that fact. But a lot of times I'll read a review where they say something like, "Oh, he just borrowed this from Borges, like I'd hidden it." But no, no, this is
it is.
part of the theme here. And so I, uh, I think I was lying in bed after reading that story, and I thought, that would be hell to be in that library. And then it just took off, and I started writing, and I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know, I didn't have a target ending, nothing. I just started writing about, I was discovering that hell about the same time as Soren was in the story. I didn't write it towards anything. But throughout it, I was concerned about the first of all, I wanted to open the door to what if I'm wrong? What if any of us are wrong? It wasn't, I wasn't directing it towards my faith or another person's faith. It was more, I wanted to explore how that would existentially feel. And I didn't do this, but I often now think, what if there was this old sort of theater music company called Fireside Theater, back when I was a kid, and they had a song called "What If Everything You Know Is Wrong?" Uh, and I thought, everything? Wow. Wow, that, I don't know. And there's been sort of modern philosophical movements that say, yeah, everything we think is wrong because we can't get it at reality. We can be pragmatically and live as if we understand it, but a lot of times we don't know. But that song, and I'm not sure that's the title, I should be honest. That's my memory of the title and the group, but it's probably something like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great origin story for it. I like that.
Yeah, and I started playing with that. I wanted to think through that, and I really wasn't writing for anybody but me when I wrote it. I mentioned that was one of my habits, but I really just wanted to explore my own engagement with what if that song I used to listen to was, what if everything is wrong? And I think I was reading some of the um, sort of non-realistic philosophies. In science, there's kind of two ways to look at things. One is, a hardcore realist that when we talk about electrons and protons, we're getting at something real. And then there's more pragmatic thinkers who are thinking, well, these are the labels we put on certain processes and behaviors, and so I'm going to assume they work as a way to do pragmatic science, but we don't really know what's down there at the bottom. And so I wrestle with that, thinking about it. I work in ecology, and they're massively complex. But that's kind of where I went with it. That's where I kind of felt like I wanted to explore. What would I do if
So,
I woke up and something fundamental about who I am was wrong? Um,
right. Yeah, it's I think something I myself question a lot, and that's why it was just it was an interesting concept to me. It I think the take on hell is interesting too, where I think you're not your hell, but maybe the Zoroastrianism one. It's unique in that I think most versions of hell that we might imagine we seem to like experience it in a solitary way. You know, if you're going in the lake of fire, you're by yourself, you're burning, you're tortured on repeat for, you know, that's the very classic fear mongering version of that. Um, could be true, who knows? Yours undercuts this massively, you know, by adding in this whole aspect of social relationships, and not only that, but a way out of the hell.
Hmm.
So I was reading up on Zoroastrianism, and you know, I'm still not entirely familiar with the rules, but uh th it felt comforting to me. And it was like it was weird because it was, even though this was hell, it was like you can go up to the food stands that they have available on every floor, order, you know, Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington every night of the week. And you know, I it was weird because I was like, I might hang out there. I might just hang out there for a while and eat to my heart's content. You know, you can still drink and do whatever, and it was just it was very interesting. It was like a very comforting thing. So, you know, how much of that was you? How much of that was the religion? You know, I just thought that was all interesting.
Yeah, I think what surprises a lot of people that read it, and it surprised me too, because I didn't see it coming as well, is at first it just doesn't seem that bad, you know?
Mhm.
It just doesn't seem like this hell is much of a hell. It's you still can form relationships with people. You can form romantic relationships with people. You get to eat whatever you want. You wake up cured of anything that happened to you during the daytime. If you went to sleep drunk, you wake up completely sober, no ill effects. There's no any consequences of any bad thing that happens to you. And so for a while, it just didn't seem that bad, but it grows on you. You start to see it. You start to see how awful it would be. And it's all in terms of the existential meaning of what's going on there. And I think that's the power of the book, is that everything's provided for you. Anything you want to do, anything nice places to sleep and even explore, I think. But at some point you realize that this repetition, this endless life is turns into a boring place to live forever and ever and ever. And I think that's the power of the conditions of the hell, is it starts off seeming, yeah, I could do this. And then it becomes, uh, I won't give the spoilers, but it becomes a nightmare. And
Right.
not one that's imposed. It's not an external nightmare. It's the conditions of that hell itself create a a place that is not good to be.
Well, and I guess maybe to my question, I think that without trying to spoil anything, but when he's in the hell, there's relationships that come and go, but it's the loss of those relationships, one in particular, that's just
Yeah,
so devastating. I mean, it hangs over the whole book. It's mentioned in the first few pages. It's
yeah,
you know immediately from the onset, before you even get to this very hilarious demon, that there is just a loss of some relationship. And I felt like, you know, you have this almost parasocial relationship with those, with the character. One, if you've ever experienced death, someone dying, whatever, that's there. Loss of friendship, loss of whatever. It's there, and it's like this ghost that's kind of hanging over the whole thing. So I
yeah.
thought that was really interesting. I also had maybe a kind of a specific question, and this is a minor spoiler, but uh, the one of the mottos of Zoroastrianism that you put in the book is that uh, essentially it's a form of karma. It's you know, you be good, otherwise there's going to be grave consequences. But you know, I think throughout the book we see these kinds of occasional acts of evil with one
Mhm.
with a very large group or tribe that's kind of going around trying to be dictators at some point, and I they never really got their comeuppance or anything like that. And I had another friend I gave this book to who read the thing, and uh, you know he had an interesting take where it was like the comeuppance for them isn't that they're getting extra punish or anything, but it's that they're solidifying themselves as others and even further distancing themselves from what a positive movement forward for this hell would be,
Yeah.
which was I thought interesting. But and then again, that's a interpretation thing. But is there anything else maybe to that you'd have to say?
Yeah, I am hesitating because I'm trying to say this without giving too many spoilers. But I think I had a friend who read it, and he said they missed the point. He said the task that they were given is almost impossible, and so they should have abandoned it and just started a society of their own. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that that um, well, I'll let the reader discover, but there may be something to what kind of world could you build if you embraced inside society in a way that you didn't lose people and tried to build something positive. Um,
Hmm.
and it was an interesting thought experiment I maybe encourage readers to engage with. What if the right thing to do is just to stay there?
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I mean, it's so subjective. So, all right. Yeah. I know I'm poking dangerous territories here with any spoilers here. So,
It's okay.
but I think that's a good lead into, maybe a lot of the feelings that they're feeling. So, you write at one point that anticipation is born of hope, and hope's loss, however, is the greatest despair. So how do you view the relationship between hope and despair, maybe both personally as in the author and in the story? Do you think that the love between characters serves as an antidote to the absurdity of a despair that you can find particularly in hell, but also here on Earth?
Yeah, because yeah, I think you hit it there, is that that's one of the great challenges of Earth life is how do you engage in hope and in despair? Because I think there's great power in hope. I think that I think hope can overcome a lot of things, and in an age where despair is sort of creeping into so many people's lives, I think that we need to find ways of cutting through despair and getting at the hope. And I don't mean just sort of psychological ways isn't what I'm thinking about. It's like finding meaning in life. You mentioned the meaning that you found in your relationships and things, and I think that one of the things for humans, relationships are so important, and and as you pointed out really beautifully there about getting rid of the distractions that hold us back from forming meaningful despair. And you've created a venue here where you're forming relationships with other people and other connections, because I think that may be the antidote. And I think this is illustrated in the book as well, is that it is the relationships that save the hell from being just a curl up in a ball kind of experience. It's that ability to find meaning, to find relationships, to find futures. And that's what gets stolen in a lot of ways, is that hope for futures. Um, so I'd say that I'd say that that's a really hard problem. And while I think I diagnose it in the book, I'm not sure I know what the prescription is.
Yeah.
It's a hard question that I wrestle with. I mean, I wrestle with this all the time, and I think that that is what we need more of in the world. And I think that's why people sometimes really talk about the hope the book gives them, is that it depicts that, even though it is a awful place in a sense, given the length of time, it does, I think, portray the need we have as humans to form connections and hope.
Yeah. I think especially maybe to an earlier point where, not to beat a dead horse with the phones and everything, but I think I mean just even through surveys like legitimized research that's recently come out, and we're one of we're at a point in human history where different societies are at their loneliest right now.
Yes.
And one, because it's you have the technological separation, but two, I think it's a lot easier to fall into that despair because just like anything, I think love and relationships have been commoditized in a lot of very unique ways. So I think especially men my age now. I'm 26. So I see it as young as 18 to 35. I'd say it's we're not going out and dating. Uh, like we're not going out and drinking and partying as much. It's a much different focus. And I think some of that's because of COVID. I definitely that had a way to propel it, but it's just we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to go out and physically interact. We don't need to be players in the world to get the what I don't know serotonin kick that we
Right.
need. We get it in our phones. Um, so, to kind of back out of that a little bit, maybe Albert Camus, he talks about how you have to imagine Sisyphus pushing the boulder up. You have
Yeah.
to imagine him happy.
I love that.
Because
Yeah.
even though it's just, this monumental task, and even though I think that's the problem with relationships where you're constantly pushing for these physical things. It's very hard. I have it in my own life. Like it's a hard time to make friends. They just don't come as natural as they used to.
Mhm.
But in your opinion, as the philosopher you are, what do you think people should exercise in order to avoid ending up in like a doubting everything spiral?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, and I think I'm not sure I know what to do, but I do feel very keenly that it's necessary. I think the things you've pointed out are exactly right. We've got a lot of distractions, and we are surrounded by entertainment. I just pick up my phone, and all of a sudden a video will click on, and then I'll watch 20. You know,
Right.
it's an endless stream of entertainment. I mean, we've got lots and lots of movies and television shows all competing for our attention, and we watch those relentlessly. And I think we are missing something about the connections that we do need to be. We evolved in groups of people that we knew, and we our brains still need that, I think. And I think the current technology allows us to subvert that very real need. I think you've hit on something really important, I think, and I don't know how to create a movement of rebellion to say, like you did. I mean, that takes courage. I mean, that I'm not sure I've developed yet, because I listen to that and I think I need to do that too. But then I think, oh, but how will I get my news, or how will I, engage with people? And you just pointed out that it's not. It's different.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it it took me a while. It really did. It was like But you know what? I figured if there is an invasion on U.S. soil, I will hear about it when I need to hear about it. If there is another outbreak, I will hear about it when I need to hear about it. If
Yeah.
it never hits me, it never hits me. And it's not, one of my friends, very politically active, brought up the fact, well, if you're not on there, how are you going to keep up with maybe what's going on in Israel or Palestine? And it's like, not that I am heartless, not that I am any of those things, and I will read up on it on my own time if I wish, but it's not something that I believe myself or any human was designed to ingest that much world news every single day. I think you know that's maybe a common theme I'm realizing about myself. It's things are too big for their own good, and I think we have
Yeah.
sometimes I know knowledge is power. You might have too much power sometimes. I think a lot of us have too much power, and we're not able to tackle all the things that technology gives us access to in a responsible way, or in a way that we can spend enough time to be intelligent participants with.
Yeah.
So, I guess maybe throwing this back to your work, we've talked a lot about, here and there, like kind of our takes on contemporary culture,
Mhm.
uh, you know, the zeitgeist feelings of the day. But as someone who straddles with science, faith, and art in 21st century America, how do you perceive the current, I guess, I don't know, all in all, cultural climate? And maybe how might themes of hope and transcendence in your work speak to audiences concerned about community in our time? And I know we touched on a little bit of that, but maybe a more concentrated take.
Yeah. No, I like that because I think that's sort of the focus I think that the world needs is a sense of community because as you described, to it's very difficult to respond to things that we don't have any control over or any influence on. And I have some good friends who are involved in community building, and they're tackling the political moment right now by trying to build connections with people and trying to 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 speak to what the community needs. One of the things that I really enjoy are sound studies. And I read a lot about that, and I do a lot of bird recording and things. But I listened to a lecture. I wish I could remember the name of the person that did it. That they were talking about this need that there was a forest that the community was debating whether they should sell it for lumber or they should use it for recreation for the community. And the guy realized that it was just so politically divisive. Everybody had pulled into a camp, and he said, "Well, what we need to do is we need to have conversations." And so he started forest walking, and he invited very, very conservative people, very, very liberal people to come together and walk the forest together. And as they began to walk the forest together and began to have real conversations with their neighbors, um, that something unfolded that he really didn't think would work. But suddenly
Yeah.
they were having conversations. They were learning the names of the birds in the woods. They were learning, they were meeting there on their own. The community began to pull together in really interesting ways that, starting a campaign to save the forest would have attracted certain groups and not other groups. But the walking, just being together, became an action that in the end brought them together about the use of the forest and how it served the community and became aware of the ecological services that were being provided by the forest that they didn't know about, the streams and how that affected fishing and things like other activities that everybody began to do. And so I think there's something to that. I think there's something to the idea that maybe start where you are is a possibility. Because even in hell, that's where it started. It started in there's one scene where they form a group, but it started as a community. They began to try to build an orchestra. They began, it began to be this attempt at being together. And I think that's where we're lacking. I'm maybe, as you pointed out, the the world is too big of a piece of concern. Although I don't disagree. We need to solve world problems because they're,
Right.
they'll be there. But maybe the way to start talking about world problems isn't to start talking about world problems. It's to start about what do I need to do here right now to make this community a better place to live. And that's where I think it could bubble into bigger things and more useful things and more united things.
I like that take a lot. I think you're making me think and almost realize just how uh spread out or dissipated, dissolved our communities have become. And when you go to your local coffee shop, wherever it might be, I think we like those kinds of spaces, those third places, because that's where you get that real life version of it. And that's honestly, it's weird. It's like those are some of the last places you can do it.
Yeah,
It's not like I don't know, because again, I think with technology, our eyesight has gone from local and we're shifted up,
yeah, I think
so
too.
I think that's exactly to your point. So I have some ending questions. You've been very
Okay.
generous with your time. Thank you so much
Yeah, thank
again.
you for having me. I hope this is useful.
I it, I'm going to be thinking about this for a couple months here. So absolutely. So through this discussion, it's very safe to say you're a very unique author. You're a very pleasant person. I really enjoyed this. So maybe what is something that you want people to know about you? And I don't know, is there anything with your work and that people often get wrong, that you'd like to go on the record and just be like, you know what, this is who I am?
Yeah, I think um, I don't really look for a particular reaction when I read reviews. For example, I'm never bothered if they hated the book or if they loved the book.
Hmm.
Um, and so I've never thought about that before. But one thing I think that's sort of been this will sound really bizarre, but I've become involved in birds and it's getting me outside and thinking about music and thinking about deeper issues of what it means. I've been reading a woman named Vincent Dupre called Living as a Bird. And what she points out is that birds also are agents that engage in a lot of the things that we do. They improvise their songs. Some birds, not all birds, but a goodly number of birds improvise. She writes a lot about territory and how territory, in the scientific story, it's just a contest for mating rights, things like that. But she points out that's not how it works. It's a performance. It's not I'm stronger, I'm weaker, so I'm going to back out. I'm not going to fight. Or you do fight and you find out who is stronger. She points out it's a performance. And she said, it's not the greatest fighter that wins these contests, it's the greatest actor. And what she's pointing out is that there's so much at play in the natural world. I'm a lover of ecology. And that's why the short stay in hell has none. It's 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 like
I did
what
notice
makes the
that too.
hell.
Yeah, I think that was a line where you pointed that out. It was
Yeah,
because again, it's like it's such a unique concept where you're not realizing, oh yeah, there's no grass, there's no trees, there's no natural sound. It's just quiet.
yeah, yeah. And no diversity, no in people or in things. They're all homogeneous, and that's I think what is hell. And I think if we engage more with the natural world, if we take the time to listen to birdsong, I love recording bird songs. I love recording nature. I like being out in it. And for me, that's where I find my peace and my muse and my ability to think through hard issues is on hikes and walking. And that attention and engagement with the natural world is really getting lost in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
I teach a honors class in birds and music with a music professor, but it's getting them out into the world of birds and listening and identifying and that really I think they suddenly become really excited about something that's all around us. You can look at birds in your backyard or in the city. Their behavior is fascinating. So I suppose what I'd say is I don't really mind being got wrong.
Yeah.
I, I'm I've got a really thick skin, so uh,
Yeah.
I don't mind that. But I think if I wanted to encourage people to get things right about me, it's that I do love nature, and I think nature is probably what returns us to the mind that we evolved with, the spiritual and mystical grounding that we've evolved to engage with, and whatever forces that has on us, whatever that turns out to be, even if it's Zoroastrianism. Oh my, and my book, I'd say don't learn Zoroastrianism from my book. It's almost got nothing to do with it. It was kind of like uh, just a what's the word they call the Maltese falcon? I want to say uh, a mulligan. I can't remember the word.
I like a kind of a placeholder almost.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
something that acts as a focus, but it's not really important. If
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
We call those press conferences in the United States, I think.
yes.
Something
Good.
like that. I don't know. Man,
Uh,
I'm very political today, aren't I? Okay, how about that?
yeah.
Uh, no, I like that a lot. I think one of my favorite authors, and he's really only written one thing, is Marco Pierre White, and he was the first, really big enfant terrible celebrity chef. He's the one who taught Gordon Ramsay, so he's kind of like
Oh
the
wow.
OG. Yeah, and he has his book, A Devil in the Kitchen, which is his recountant. Uh, you know, I think he dropped out of high school, whatever, and he is still to this day, I believe, the youngest three Michelin star chef who ever, achieved that. But his whole thing is whenever he's stressed in a state of despair, whatever, he returns to his surrogate mother, Mother Nature, and you'll
Uh,
see him in any interview say that in every book. That's just his go-to line. But it's really interesting his relationship with food, and after he had won his three Michelin stars, he's like there was nothing really for me to compete for anymore. He gave his three Michelin stars back, which no one's ever done that, and he
wow.
moved into the woods, you kind of cottage like English side, and hunted game, raised his own pigs, his own cows. But his appreciation for nature and his craft was, kind of reminded me a little bit of what you're saying here. And when you're returning to that, it really is something. It reminds you that you're not the only person occupying this earth. Uh, Very small but corny thing when I just moved back from Philly. We're kind of in the suburbs, but not enough to have a lot of animals.
Mhm.
And we came here to Beverly and we walked outside. This was maybe a few months ago, and the whole lawn had snails everywhere. And I felt like a little kid again. And I was like, this is incredible.
That's
I
great.
took pictures and I sent them to my whole family. And I'm like, this isn't the most exciting thing going on in my life, but I felt like it was because it was just one
Yeah,
of those
yeah, and it was.
reality checks.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's brilliant and beautiful that you want that known, that's reflected in your work there.
You've
Um,
given me a book I need to read now, so I want.
yeah, I'm gonna read Living as a Bird. So
Okay, good.
this is a good exchange. Yes, this was useful. Back to your questions. There we are. Well, Stephen, thank you so much again for your time. I really, really appreciate it. This has been one of my favorite conversations I might have ever had.
I thought so
I
too.
really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'll
so thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So.
Absolutely. All right. And I will stop the recording here. Thank you everyone for watching.
Yes.